guys ready over there?
Someone's got their sound down.
Guys ready over there? Oh. Good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. At this time, if we could rise, if you're able, for our national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
At this time, if I could call on Councillor Bruno for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Worship. The Niagara region is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe. Included the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island who live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Thank you, Councillor. We have two proclamations this evening. I'm going to do 4.2 first. May is Museum Month, May 1st to 31st, 2023. If I could have Councillors Bodner and Hoyle move that. All those in favor? That's carried. And next is item 4.1, Mountain View Lemonade Day, Saturday, June 10th of 2023. We do have a presentation. And we have Ellen Shonwill, who's the Senior Manager of Donor Relations, and Cheryl Matthews, Trustee for FACTS Foundation Board of Directors, and they will be giving us a virtual presentation. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. In place of Ellen, we have Brett Sweeney. Thank you so much for having us today to talk about Mountain View Lemonade Day for FACTS Niagara. Brett's going to be my presentation driver today, so thank you so much. So my name is Cheryl Matthews, and I serve on the board of the foundation, and I'm excited to share some info about our Mountain View Lemonade Day. And we hope that this initiative will help support the young people in Port Colborne and across Niagara. It's the second year for our initiative, so we'll give you a little bit more information. The beauty of this initiative is it's about kids helping kids. And the idea actually came from a couple of young people in Niagara who wanted to do something to help other children. And you might recall last year, Mountain View Lemonade Day invited families to set up lemonade stands in their communities, and then they could collect donations to help support sending children to summer camp. So this year on Saturday, June 10th, teams of kids will set up lemonade stands across Niagara to ask for those donations. And it's so important because the funds we're raising, sending kids to summer camp, it's part of their emotional health and well-being that they have these type of interactions. And 100% of the money raised goes straight to the kids, thanks to our sponsor. Next slide, please, Brett. You can see here a quote from our amazing FACTS Niagara CEO. There are so many children in our community who deserve an opportunity to be with friends, connect with nature, and make lasting childhood memories. And sometimes the families supported by FACTS don't have the financial resources to send their kids to camp. And we truly believe that all children should have that opportunity. And hence, the money raised here goes 100% to making those things happen for our kids in care. Next slide, please. So last year, in our inaugural year of the event, we raised an incredible $85,000 to send children to camp. And it was families and municipalities like yourselves that helped us make that happen. This year, we're hoping for an even bigger and better event to make a positive difference for our families and our kids. So you might be asking, so what does $85,000 do? Well, last year we were able to give more than 400 children in Niagara a summer camp experience. That included attending week-long day camps, potentially, supporting a foster family that could take the kids on a camping excursion, some overnight camps, which are incredible opportunities for kids. And then others that, because we were dealing still with some pandemic restrictions, it may have been as simple as receiving a special camp at home basket with lots of fun to keep the kids active. So some additional information about FACTS Niagara. We serve an average of 398 children in care each month, and more than 700 families have been receiving ongoing services to help them be at their best. And our goal is to give children that we serve a summer camp experience. And we're hoping that you can proclaim our day and help with that. So our goal this year is 100 stands across Niagara. And we fund and provide the families with their stands. Each team receives everything they need to run their lemonade stand. So the banner, the stand, T-shirts, hats, lemonade concentrate, pitchers, cups, stickers, and more. And as you can see from the photo there, the kids like to decorate it up a little bit themselves, and they have a great time with it. We saw some wonderful photos of kids getting involved to raise money for kids last year. And like I said, one of the beautiful things about this is thank you to our sponsor. 100% of the proceeds that are raised from these stands go towards sending kids and youth to summer camp. No fees associated with it. So registration, I believe, opened just last week. It is open now, but there's more information that can be found at factsniagarafoundation.org or the phone number that you see on the screen. So anybody can visit the website and register for their stand. Our goal in the end is to help make summer a little sweeter for everyone. We're asking all of our municipalities to help us. We'd be grateful for your support in making summer a little bit sweeter. We ask if you could help us by sharing it on your social and other community channels that you may have. And our ask today is that you declare June 10th Mountain View Lemonade Day for FACTS Niagara. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you have, but much thanks for letting us speak to you today about this important event.
Great, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Brett, for attending this evening. Are there any questions to the presenters? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Is there any way to color outside the lines a little bit and have it on a Friday instead of a Saturday if someone chose to do that, or is it locked into Saturday?
Cheryl?
I believe you can start your stand whenever you like if the Friday works best. I don't believe we're opposed. Brett, I'm sure, can confirm that for us.
Absolutely. Last year we had some schools get involved, and obviously they don't sit over the weekend, so they've done theirs a little bit earlier. So if someone wants to do it on a Friday night, a Thursday night, whatever works best for your family, but just for the sake of having that one common date, we've chosen June 10th. But if individual families decide that it works best for you to do it on the night before, the day after, absolutely, we can accommodate that, and that's perfectly within bounds.
Great, Councillor?
Mr. Mayor, I was just thinking, we have a nice market on Friday. Some enterprising youth wanted to skip school and do a lemonade stand. I didn't say skip school, but yeah.
Could be a school
Something like
project.
that anyways.
Could be a school project.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks.
Entrepreneurism. Certainly. Great. Any further questions? Okay, so at this time, if I could ask Councillors Elliott and Bruno to move that Mountain View Lemonade Day be Saturday, June 10th, 2023. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Again, Cheryl and Brett, thank you very much. Look forward to a good lemonade again this year.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.
You. Thanks so much.
Next is the adoption of the agenda. Councillors, it is the amended agenda that everybody received, so we'll adopt the agenda as amended by staff. And I know Mr. Bowles has one clarification on it's more of a spelling of a street name was wrong, that's being corrected. So if I could have Councillors Bagu and Beauregard move the agenda as amended. Any questions or changes? All in favor? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Okay. We have 3 sets of minutes, 7-1 to 7-3. We have the public meeting of April 11th, 2023, regular meeting of council April 25th, 2023, and council orientation, education, and training session May 2nd, 2023. If I could have Councillors Aquilina and Bodner move that. Are there any questions to any of those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. The following reports have been pulled for separate discussion. Items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4. Are there any further items? If I could have Councillors Hoyle and Elliott move those items that weren't pulled. All in favor? That's carried. We have 2 presentations this evening, Council. 10.1 is the City of Port Colborne Museum and Culture Annual Department Update. Madam Museum is here. It's your turn.
Great, thank you for having me. To the Mayor and Council, I'm here on behalf of the Department of Museum and Culture. Last year when I spoke with you, it was a new department, and I'm really here to give you the update about how things went, how things are going, and our expectations for the future. So to start our program, I've just got a little bit about the staff that we do have at the museum. We're lucky that within the last year, a couple of our part-time staff were able to go to full-time to really help the department grow. So we have listed there our staff, including our archivist, our registrar, our community engagement officer, myself, public programmer, assistant curator, the custodian, the receptionist. So those are the staff that work throughout the year. As well, we do write a lot of grants. We get summer students, and there are over 340 volunteers that help us throughout the year. So that's something that we like to mention when we're here at council, is though we do have some paid staff, we have a lot of unpaid staff that do our work as well. In terms of what we do, our slogan is more than a museum, and it's never been more true. In terms of the facilities, we do encompass quite a lot of facilities here in Port Colborne, starting with the Heritage Research Archives, which a lot of people go to do research, but also it does programming, walking tours, things of that nature. Our volunteer-run Edwardian Tea Room, which is seasonal and run by our museum auxiliary. The Heritage Village is quite popular for tourists as well as our school programs. We have a blacksmith shop. We have the log schoolhouse, the log house, as well as our carriage house, which is now an agricultural museum. The schoolhouse is where we do a lot of our start of our programming, and then the grounds itself are a great place for being underneath, having a picnic if you're there with a class, or the marine park. The lighthouse exhibit is something that we change. It's a marine exhibit lighthouse. Right now we have a Meisner exhibit in there, so we are a marine museum, and we always like to keep our marine aspect with us. Our Heritage Resource Center has our 1901 Neff steam buggy, as well as our artifact collection. So that's 2 stories of the facility that are purpose-built for storage of our artifacts, and we do let visitors come in there by appointment, as well as we have our Heritage Gardens and Pavilion, and not to forget our Roselawn Center, which was our newest addition to our facility. So that's really brought the Department of Museum and Culture into a new fold. So where do we focus? Well, we focus on community engagement. As I said, our volunteer management is very important. Preserving marine heritage is key, and offering the research services. Annual events, workshops, speaker series. We do tourism in terms of on-site and off-site tours. We do Humberston, West Street. We do cemetery tours. There's access to arts and culture and heritage, especially at the Roselawn Center. We've really grown our access for artists to display and to try their hand, or the public to come and try their hand at different arts that they haven't tried before. Our exhibits and programming for both the residents and tourism. And then, of course, one of the key areas that we worked on it in the last year, and we continue to, are our partnerships that are so important to the success of the Port Colborne. First and foremost being our public library, which is next door on the cultural block, our heritage committee, which is now part of the board of management, and something that we want to get even more so off the ground to recognize the built heritage in Port Colborne. Our Museums of Niagara Association is an important partner with us for cross-promotion training, as well as our Friends of Roselawn Center that help to support us financially and with events, and our museum auxiliary. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our donors, both our artifact donators and people that help us financially, as well as our businesses and sponsors. We have a great community museum in terms of those connections that we have with our community, and we rely on them to make our events and programming profitable. So one of the things that I just wanted to flip through with our successes is I do have a pretty extensive annual report, but instead of going through it, there's a lot of information and you got a copy of it. I just really want to give you a few highlights from each of the items on the report that I have. So the first page that we have there with the division, we talk about our 2023. The items that you see in 2023, some of them are the events that we have with our annual events, and some of them are new events. So in 2023, some of the ones that were new that we really are focusing on now are Heritage Workshop that we're going to continue doing, as well as some of the activities that we did with community partners. Francophone Community was one of our partners that we had, and we're going to continue on that. So for our programming on 2023, as the proclamation said, May is Museum Month, and we welcome all of the visitors of Port Colborne to our museum. We are a free museum. We have expanded our exhibits and services. So this year we have 65 things listed on our program calendar for the Department of Museum and Culture. They're throughout the city of Port Colborne, on-site and off-site. One of the other focuses we have for 2023 is really our accessibility. So I talked a little bit about the Francophone community. That's one of our ways that we're trying to reach more of our population. But we also have some built heritage items that we're looking at. Our Heritage Resource Center is listed to have the wooden boardwalk put into cement, so it's easier access to the Neff steam buggy. And we did get a quote for a ramp to Roselawn Center as well. The other way we're meeting our accessibility is through digitization of the collection. So making sure we're scanning things, getting things on our Ontario website so people can engage. We are also reviewing our job positions with HR for the department to make sure that these new solidified roles are working well, and the terms of reference for our board and heritage committee are something we're doing actually this month for May is Museum Month. We'll be having some staff come in and helping, making sure that everything's working in those departments. The other thing I wanted to mention is I talked a little bit about the student grants, but we've really been successful in obtaining grants on every level, federal, provincial. We even had some regional grants that we were able to access, and they've really helped us to provide that extra bit of service for our community. The city supported our capital request with $26,000 of shelving over the last few years. So in support of having those installed and all of the artifacts put on it, the Museum Assistant Program gave us a grant for a staff person. So we'll have a one-year contract that will be paid for, and that's wonderful. That's for our digitization of both our collection and for our textiles. We also are partnering with the Niagara Peninsula Area Aboriginal Management Board, and they offer work terms for Indigenous youth, and that's 100% funded, and it's a great relationship with that board to build really youth skills. And then we've got 3 applications in for 2023 for that. So last year was our first year with that program. We had 1 student, and we've got 3 applications in. So a lot of our Indigenous collections are now online under our Ontario through that last grant. And we are planning to expand our Francophone community services. We have a new grant that we've applied through for the provincial government called Nous Sommes Ici. We are here, and essentially we're going to try to support our Francophone community, letting people know that they're here, that they want space, and include them in our already existing Canal Days, our Pie Social, all of the events, Christmas Festival, as well as the new Music on the Lawn series that we're planning at Roselawn. So in terms of the museum and culture future plans and strategies, I think I'd take a lot of time to talk about what's going on, but what I do want to share with you is that we do have some great tools. The Roselawn visioning session that strategic planning staff helped us with, that was in November of 2021, actually really was the jump off for us to know what we were doing there and how that would integrate into the museum. From there, the CAO and again, strategic planning staff helped us with our plan for the Department of Museum and Culture. So we have a 2023-2028 plan. We're just including a little bit more about the Heritage Committee into that plan and hope to be bringing that forward at the May board meeting. As well, the facilities review has been done for some of our locations. That's giving us more tips on where we need to focus our capital requests as well as our accessibility plans. The increased staff hours, which we already received from the public programmer and register from part-time to full-time in 2023 has really helped to maintain these new operations, and of course the full-time community engagement officer. So that's something that we did successfully get in 2023. And we are keeping in mind the arts and cultural master plan as well, in terms of something that we want to make sure we're keeping those things for the city as a whole in our own planning. So I guess a few other things I'll tell you is we have, over 21,000 artifacts in our collection. We're open every day from 12 to 5, free admission, and we'd love to have you there. So I'd be happy to take any questions you have as well.
Great, Stephanie, thank you. Questions, Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Stephanie. Just sitting here thinking about some other things, the way the world is going, and particularly youth and the next generation. So you talked about those hours, and there's really like 6 months there, and there's so much to see at the museum, and there's nothing like being there to absorb it, touch it, feel it, smell it, be there, talk to the people. But is there ever a thought that for the next generation, like, could we have a 24/7, 365-day museum if the museum tour was filmed? And it's something I haven't heard of anybody doing other than the big guys. And I don't know, it would require probably a lot of money. Maybe it's a audio-visual Niagara College group. But it seems to me that, I think what I want to know is, how do you capture the next generation without getting them in the door? And you see where people want everything. They want it when they want it. They want it now if they want it now. And maybe it's an area that maybe amongst your colleagues, I don't know if it's ever been talked about, but I know I've done a museum tour online, and it was a museum well, it's not really a museum, but place that I had gone. They even had the walking tour, when you're there, the earphones and all that stuff. But I don't know, maybe it's something to look at to get the next generation of museum goers. I mean, if you get hooked on film, you might want to actually go see it live.
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno. Yeah, I think that is definitely something. We went to the Ontario Museum Association conference. That's something we were talking about. They have VR. They also have really interesting apps, even for a phone, that are like our Then and Now series. If you're part of the Facebook LR Wilson page, you'll see this is what it looks like today, and here's the photo of it from 1896. And they have apps that you can put it up, and it will show you that. But I can say that as we make our plans, we do try to remain accessible. So we want to have that ability, even if a person doesn't have a phone. So we do both sides of things. One of the great assets that we have already on the City of Port Colborne website is we do have an interactive well and canal exhibit that you can see the building of the first, second, third, fourth. You can see who the people were that built it, and things like that are very popular. So we try to include that in both our planning and our exhibits for each year. But I will also mention that even when we're not open, we do have people come. So in February we do Heritage Week, we have March break, so they even get to come behind the scenes when the museum is closed. We also have behind the scenes tours of our collections. So those things kind of can pique the interest even when we're not May to December. But I would say that forethought is something that if you're not doing it, then you're not in 2023, absolutely. And there are definitely programs that you can work with both Brock University and Niagara College to work on something like that.
Great, thank you for being so open-minded about it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next we have our head librarian. Welcome, Susan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council, thank you for having the library here this evening and be able to report. There's kind of a running gag that nobody wants to follow the museum, but here I am, so I will do my best. So, our library, our team, starting with our library board, who runs concurrently with the City Council, and who's put together this amazing strat plan, which we've just enacted, and 3 months into it. Our CEO, our library CEO is Scott Louie. Our library board treasurer is Brian Bowles, and myself, the director of library services. And we have an amazing team: 1 full-time librarian, 5 full-time assistant librarians, and 4 part-time librarian assistants. And they all do an amazing job. So moving on, services at a glance, what we do. So I sat there and I thought about what we do. I listed everything that's important, and I hope you had a chance to look at it. But I think at first glance, people think what we do is we do books. And we certainly do books, and we do story time, we do children's programs, but libraries are much, much more. We absolutely do those books, but libraries serve a larger social purpose. It was predicted that libraries had run their course with internet and digitization of books, but we proved the naysayers wrong, and we are still here, and individuals continue to use libraries for vital services and needs. We have and continue to be responsive to people's needs. We provide safe, accessible, and free access to information and resources, educational opportunities, literacy, lifelong learning for our community, and to help people succeed and for their enjoyment. I actually, in terms of enjoyment, remember how scandalous it was in 1990s when we had videotapes with movies, like real movies, Hollywood movies, and people were in uproar because we should just have documentaries. But again, we proved the naysayers wrong. We still have movies in our libraries. So because the libraries are free, they play an important role in financially strengthening our local economy. We provide free internet for people who are searching for jobs. We help small business with tech help and with printing. We help people during COVID with income tax clinics. We help them navigate really complicated COVID rules. We provide through Link an access to an entire network of Niagara libraries, allowing our taxpayers access to collections across Niagara, making their taxpayer dollars go farther because we can bring in books from other libraries for them. That reduces the cost of our own collection building through resource sharing and other shared services that we have through Niagara libraries. We help people access technology that they couldn't afford or that they would just like to try, and help them to be able to create content, even if it's going on Facebook and they haven't done it before. We have creator spaces, green screen, music maker spaces, and these are expanding, and we have plans for a lot more this year. We are about social inclusion, and we're a place where people can connect or where they can just be. We're a public space where everyone is allowed to feel safe, find opportunities for themselves, and it's been said that libraries reimagine the civic commons because the public space and ways of interacting have changed for our public. We're a place of encounter, programs, you can discuss books, you can quilt, you can make, you can do, you can sit, you can just have conversations with each other. We're a place where people can improve their lives. We're a place when people can shout out their successes, and if you check out currently our art show in our atrium, it is like Shore Catholic High School, and it is an amazing collection of art. Next month it'll be Port Colborne High. Libraries, what we do, we are welcoming, safe, diverse, and inclusive space. We're about well-being for our community and about persons who have mental health issues. We welcome everyone who walks through the door without judgment. We're a place where everyone is an important part of our community. Library spaces are about social inclusion, as I said, and the opportunity to engage, and for people who are experiencing some amount of homelessness perhaps, or mental health issues, or have addictions. Libraries are about social justice, social services, and our Let's Talk About series is back this year. We have 4 planned, and we're focusing on social justice issues again, and we connect with our community partners and agencies who support persons of everyone. We are champions of intellectual freedom, free speech, and expression, and I would say that we preserve information, and we are the remedy for misinformation. You want to find out what's right, come to your library. We have the accurate information there. So what do? We align our strategic goals with that of the city for the betterment of our community. And what we do and what we can't do is coming more and more to light, because sometimes what we can't do is because we are not social workers, we are not nurses, we are not safety specialists, but we are experts in information and connecting people with the agencies that are so. What we are also is we are proud to be the Port Colborne Public Library, and we strive to be the best that we can be and to make you proud of your library. So next, library services at a glance. So where we focus, I've spoken about where we focus. It's about that safe, warm, welcoming, and attractive place. It's about our facility, maintaining it, keeping it accessible and sustainable, free or low-cost programming, resource sharing, cost savings, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion, and building strong strategic partnerships with our community agencies, and having knowledgeable and tech-savvy staff, and excellent service, and being ambassadors for the City of Port Colborne. So our return to normal, 2022 didn't have an easy start to it, not for any of us, with the arrival of Omicron, the next Omicron variant. So it impacted library services. We really didn't get open fully and leave curbside until March of 2022. And we saw a return to normal operations then. And when we did open our doors in 2022, all our renovations had been completed. We had a $121,000 Trillium Resilient Communities Fund grant with a new service desk, accessible meeting spaces, accessible workstations with improved lighting and networking. We were user-focused. We added a cashless payment system, updated our connectivity and our Wi-Fi. We have been continued to meet the rising demand for print services. Expanding our tech help, our Library of Things, and we focused on our Indigenous collection. And at the side, you can see that CIRC, revenue, patron visits, print jobs, and our circulation amongst Link were all up. Of course, 2022 from 2021. And our next page, please. Our library achievements and successes. Again, just everything is up. We're not as far as 2019. Our goal is to get to 2019 and beyond this year. But we had incredible successes in getting started again. And our achievements and successes, we visited Northland Point all throughout the pandemic and continue to do so because they need that service. We introduced park passes, which were a big hit. Again, the income tax clinics, we introduced art with Kyla because that was a very strong and successful program. We worked on our programs and our collaborative work, especially with our museum next door. In terms of events, our next slide, please. We didn't miss an event last year, which was awesome. And what we did actually too was our art gallery opened and welcomed our first show since 2019 with the Port Colborne Art Club, and then followed by the South Coast Niagara Artists. We actually held a Let's Talk about focusing on teen mental health. That was with local author Sarah DeWard, Niagara Region Public Health Nurses, and Pathstone. And our current projects and activities, again, increasing our programming. That is our big goal to surpass what we had done in 2019 and beyond. Focusing on marketing, promotion, and upgrading our communication strategies, extending, actually working on truth and reconciliation calls to actions for public libraries. And in terms of our projects, we are working our capital projects, and we'll get those done easily by the end of 2023. And to improve and innovate user experience, we are going to update our financial system and move to Diamond so that we are not duplicating services across the city. Moving forward with more lendable technology and supporting staff. And our next slide, future plans and strategies, focusing on increasing our volunteer base, market, and that's my mantra for 2023. Fundraising activities and advocacy, reaching out to local business, all the business and the Chamber of Commerce, enhancing our services for newcomers and creating a on-site welcome wagon and a virtual welcome wagon so that we have so many newcomers come to the library, they need to know more about Port Colborne and where to find all the amenities that they need to build a life here. We're doing a diversity audit of the collection and hoping for, these are our strat plan hopes and actions, to get a novel branch at Valet, so we have a presence at Valet, and to be, as the board is, very people-focused and investing in our staff to best serve our community. And we end it with patrons' comments, because they always have the last word, and all of them are very positive, and they're very focused on our building, on the accessibility and inclusivity of the library, and also many comments, good comments about our staff, who are ever helpful, friendly, supportive, and compassionate. And that is my update for
Susan,
bring us to date.
Yeah, great, thank you. Questions? Councillor Baggio?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. Thank you very much, Susan. It's a great report as always. Being on the board of directors also and a councillor, I was really glad to see this newcomers welcome wagon that he talked about. And I think it's something the whole city could do, get together from public works to finance to everybody. And hopefully we can get every department together, and the new people that come to Port Colborne, this way they know everything about our city, and I think it'll make them a lot more comfortable.
I think so too.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Susan. Excellent report. One thing that struck me, and maybe you could put some meat on the bone and tell me more about it. High demand for print services. And so I'm wondering sort of what it's come from to, yearly, 2-year, 3-year. What is it you're printing for people? And so what's behind the statement?
I think what's behind it is the fact that people buy a home printer and then they go to buy a toner and it costs way more than the original printer that they had. So I think that the investment for printing is very much for us, is hard for people. And they just come to the library and we print off a couple pages for them. Some people, we have people who are new business owners. They do a lot of printing. During COVID, there were a lot of businesses that came to the library to do their printing for them. And during COVID, we provided all those services for free because we weren't open to, it was one of the perks and one of the things that we gave back to the community. So you have people, students doing homework. It's the variety of what everybody prints. But they come to the library, and what they are demanding and what they would like and what we would like to provide for them is the ability to bring a mobile device into the library and print from there, because it makes the least amount of barriers we can provide that we can give our takeaway to providing good service, and that's what this whole print server thing is happening. It's huge, whether you're in a university or in a library of any size. Printing for the public is really important.
Counselor?
Could you give me some context on like sort of what it's come to and grown to? Like, I don't know if it's, whether you know the amount of pages you printed or customer pages versus others. I'm just trying to get that scale, because if it is a growing thing, then maybe we, need higher tech that's cheaper tech and more efficient tech and all of that stuff.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. So we had over 5,000 print jobs last year that the public printed off of the public computer downstairs. So that's how we know that that's how it's being used by the public. And what we do have is we do have a print server module. It's hooked into our booking software. It is one component, and we put it in. And actually, I was doing that job at the time in probably 2013, and it was about $7,000 at the time. So everything's coming to end of life, and there are more efficient ways to do it. And we're searching for a solution to upgrade that print service and to provide better service. And also, people walking in with your devices, you want to print that way. I mean, it's 2023. We shouldn't just be saying you have to sit down at a public computer, call up your Facebook, call up this, call up that. We have to provide as few barriers as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Seeing none, if I could have Councillors Bruno and Bagu move that we receive the presentations. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks again, Susan. Next is our Mayor's report. Last week I attended Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Just to give you a bit of an introduction, the Cities Initiative is a binational coalition of Canadian and U.S. mayors and local officials who are working collaboratively to promote the environmental and socioeconomic health of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River Basin. It was founded in 2003. It was developed by mayors for mayors. And we are driving municipal engagement and focus on basin-wide issues. We do advocacy for programs, policies, and resources. We do collaboration on issues of shared interest between Canada, the U.S., provinces, and states. And we do education on solutions to common challenges. Our four strategic pillars are the ecosystem and source water protection, climate change and coastal resilience, water equity, and the blue economy. We were there to speak with MPs from the three main parties, Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, and the NDP. My group, we met with Liberal MP Pam Damoff of Mississauga. We were meeting with MP Badaway. Being my local MP, I was put on that team, which had Vance with that. We met with Conservative MP Karen Vecchio. She's in Western Ontario, and also from Western Ontario, MP Dave Epp from the Conservative Party. Both of their ridings have Lake Erie as their shoreline. So with shoreline protection being one of our key initiatives, it's good in speaking with those members that are right along the lake, or St. Lawrence River for the other members that were there. We had members out of Quebec and Ontario with us. We had staff in from Washington and Ontario. And basically our general talking points were we're talking to the members about the historic investments in the 2023 federal budget for protection for fresh water. What we've asked for is investing in a dedicated water, stormwater, and wastewater infrastructure fund, very similar to the gas tax. We want to see some partnership to study climate change impacts on coastal areas of the basin and identify sustainable solutions. So partnering with both, this is the Canadian government partnering with Quebec and Ontario, and then take a leadership role in reducing emerging contaminants of concern, primarily plastic microfibers. Quite frankly, guys, if you actually took that to a lab, you would find all kinds of plastic in there. After every month, for all the water you drink, you consume the quantity of a credit card in plastic. Yeah, exactly. So, although it doesn't seem to be dangerous at this time, again, I'm sure somebody thought about that in 1800s when smoking became really prevalent, and then in the 50s when everybody seemed to be smoking, and then now today we know what happened. So those were some of the issues on the water side. There's a coastal resiliency study. The Army Corps of Engineers in the United States is partnering with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River states to do a whole shoreline protection study. And what we were asking our government to do is piggyback on top of that, because basically their issues are the same as our issues. For us here, we're on Lake Erie. Whether you're across the lake in New York State, Ohio, Pennsylvania, you have very similar issues, if not the same issues, as we do here on the Canadian side of Lake Erie, as well as our other lakes. So we've asked that from the Canadian government, and then we should leverage the Army Corps of Engineers study to do a whole assessment of vulnerabilities across the whole basin. And then we asked the government again about emerging pollution across the basin, and how we can prevent, especially these microfibers from coming in. The government of France they've taken a lead, and they require within the next 5 years that every new washing machine is equipped with a filter that captures those microfibers, so they don't get to the pollution plant. They don't get out of your house. You clean your filter or empty your filter in the garbage or throw it away, or I'm not sure how it works, but we spoke to all our MPs with regards to that. They all seemed very intrigued by it. On Tuesday, we were able to attend what they call the lobby, and as the couple of the ministers that I was able to meet gave me a history lesson, which I kind of said, well, I'm a bit of a history buff, and I knew the answer of where the word lobbyist came from. Well, either side of the house, right now the Parliament sits in the West Block, where there was, and I didn't know this at the time, there was a courtyard. They actually glassed over the courtyard and made the new House of Commons, and that's where question period and the business of government goes on. On either side of that, so on the government side, there's a lobby. It's like a huge lounge. It's probably the length of this room here. And on the opposition side, they have the same thing. So that's where lobbyists go to lobby. We're lucky to have Vance take us in. We met Minister Champagne, who we had here in Port Colborne about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. In fact, he brought up first I thanked him for the $23 million that the federal government came down for Wharf 18 for the revitalization of that wharf, and then he began speaking about his vision, what he saw here in Port Colborne, what we discussed with MP Badaway and himself. So very in tune with Port Colborne, which was good to hear that he remembered who we were. So it is good that we bring those members down. Minister Blair, we met with Vance's minister, whose name escapes me right now. He's the PA for the Minister of Indigenous Affairs. And then we met other MPs that were in there, and then we were taken up to the gallery. We watched the majority of question period. Vance's staff member actually got us, the number of us that went up, out of there quickly, because at 3 o'clock they were doing a vote. And for those that have ever been, as soon as the vote's called, they lock the doors. If you're in there, you don't get out. So we all either had a train or a flight to catch, so we made sure we were out of there about 5 to 3. We also did a workshop with a white paper that Stantec is doing for our organization, and then that'll be brought out. We'll bring that here when that's completed. So we did that on the Monday. All in all, it was very well done. I think we got our points across with regards to the three things that we asked for. Again, very similar to what Good Roads was about. You go for a very few number of asks. You don't want to overwhelm them. So we made sure that they got our point, and all our teams had the same talking points. And we did have our main team that our chair, Billy McKinney, Mayor of Zion, Illinois, he led with a number of board members, and they met with each of the main parties their higher up officials. So they had Monday, Tuesday meetings with those groups. So it was a great day for us and for this organization that we've been a member of for quite a while. And at this time, we welcome our 39 students who are employed by the city for the summer, and they'll be working to save towards their post-secondary education and to gain valuable experience in a variety of fields to prepare them for their lives ahead. We're all pleased you are here, and we know you'll have a great summer working with the great team here at the City of Port Colborne. And one thing I always tell them, I was in Ottawa when we did our lunch with senior staff with the students. Please stay safe out there. It's one thing that we press is to stay safe in every work day that you have here at the City of Port Colborne. The Port Colborne High School senior boys basketball team made history in 1983 by winning the Ontario Federation of Schools Athletic Association Championship. They made history again last Saturday afternoon when they reunited to see themselves in the Port High Centennial Display in the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum. You know you've made it when you're a museum exhibit. So the team is there, and the actual original banner is there. I'll give you a little bit of tidbit on that. The players, all 40 years old, 40 years older and wiser, a little bit heavier, a little less hair, paid tribute to their coach, Bruce Cant and Mrs. Cant, who was their logistical, moral, and spiritual advisor during their championship run. I met them all at the exhibit on behalf of council and the city, where we shared lots of great memories. The 1983 OFSA champion basketball team members, led by Coach Cant, are Mark Russell, Jeff James, Jeff Kleimenheg, Gordy Lannon, Kirk Fretz, Bruce Hahn, Shane McGowan, Jamie Kober, Paul Ferris, Ron Simonson, Dave Ellett, Ross Legault, and the manager was Paul DeWright. And again, congratulations, gentlemen. Good to celebrate a historic achievement with you. The banner that hangs there is green and white. The reason why it's green and white is the school colors of the high school in Timmins, who hosted that year, were certain they were going to win. So they had the banner made up with their colors. And who wins? The Blue Bears, the blue and white. So that was a tidbit of history. They actually, on their way home, ran into a huge snowstorm, so it delayed them by 2 days. There were a couple extra days in Timmins, and then they stopped again, and I think it was over in Halliburton. They had to detour because of the weather off of Georgian Bay. It was great. You know, a lot of those guys all came in when I was leaving high school. I graduated in 1980, and they were all in grade 9 or 10, and then so. But you know, it's guys that I grew up with, and you know, played some ball with, played some hockey with, and had a lot of fun. So good group, and seeing Mr. Cant there, who taught me history when I was in high school, great teacher, but also a great coach with our men's basketball teams back in the day. One of the most popular city events for children and their families is Community Safety Day. Saturday, May 13th from 11 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, right at the fire station on Clally West. It's a free event with lots of things to see and do. Sparky the fire dog and the team at the Fire and Emergency Services will serve snacks and refreshments. Test your bicycle skills in the Port Colborne Optimist Club Bike Rodeo. We hope to see hundreds of children Saturday at this fun and interactive event, and we all might learn something if we attend. Let's do our part to keep our city beautiful by cleaning up our properties on Clean Community Day, coming up in 2 weeks on Saturday, May the 27th. Here's a list of things you can get rid of by taking them to the Operations Center on Clally Street. Broken furniture, lawn chairs, broken toys, broken lawn ornaments, old plastic pails and buckets, cushions and mattresses, water-damaged books and magazines, and yes, even the old kitchen sink. All these city events are in May. In the May edition of City Hall News, please subscribe to it on our website, and you'll get one every month by email. Save the paper and always know what's happening in the city. Tomorrow, our Economic Development and Tourism Services Division will host the Niagara Industrial Association Manufacturers Breakfast, and we're looking forward to our first visit to the Humberston on Main Street. The new restaurant opened by Kyla and Kevin Eklund of Smoke and Buddha. The new Buddha Global Food Takeout joint is up front, and the special event centers and the patio is in the back. CAO Scott Louie and our economic development team will join me in welcoming industrial leaders from across Niagara to Port Colborne. Community Living Month is a province-wide annual awareness campaign to recognize the accomplishments of the community living movement. Let's join Community Living Ontario and 115 local associations across Ontario to show why inclusion matters for people who have an intellectual disability and their families. Deputy Mayor Mark Bagu will represent council as we raise a flag at City Hall to mark May as Community Living Month. I'll be in Niagara Falls Friday morning. I've been invited to meet United States Ambassador David Cohen. It will be the ambassador's first visit to Canada, and we've already invited him to Port Colborne for Canal Days. We tied that in with the Buffalo Fireboat. Yesterday, we had our inaugural meeting of the Port Colborne Health Services Working Group. The members are Donna Burrell, I'll give you a little bit of history of each person. Donna Burrell was a retired nurse, retired director of nursing at Port Colborne General Hospital, regional health programmer, Niagara Health System. Tracy Dewar, administrator at Porter Village Retirement Home. Kevin Landrak, general manager of Oscom Steel. Brent LeClaire, retired power engineer, Niagara Health System, also representing union workers from NHS in his day. Brian Lofthouse, retired pastor from Brethren of Christ Church, Port Colborne Brethren of Christ Church. He's looking after our religious connections. Terry McLean, the executive director of Bridges Community Health Center. Aaron Parthenow, pharmacist, owner of Matheson's Pharmacy. In fact, it's Gary's daughter, for those that know Gary Matheson. Dr. Jeff Remington, family and ER physician who's been many years in Port Colborne. He did have a slight sabbatical for 3 years in London, but Jeff's been a huge help in Port Colborne bringing new doctors here and setting up his health teams that work with both Port Colborne and Fort Erie. Chris Summerhays, who represents our senior community, is a retired teacher, artist, and art school owner, and myself. Donna Burrell was chosen as chair for our committee. We just basically went over introductions, where we want to go with this committee, how it ties in with healthcare in Port Colborne, because as we all know, in 2028, they will be closing the UCC at Port Colborne Hospital. So how we move forward with that, how we will be going out to our community with surveys and other information, and really looked at objectives. So we ran around the table for that. We chose the name of Port Colborne Health Services Working Group, and then kind of some next steps we talked about. And our meeting frequency right now is we're looking at monthly, and we're going through a calendar to make sure that the dates work for everybody. Looks like probably Tuesdays at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll be meeting here at room 3, and we will also be in contact with Waynfleet Mayor Grant to ask him if he wants to join our committee. 3 of the members here, although they're here in Port Colborne, do actually live in Waynfleet, so we have a representation from both our communities. Obviously, as we know, Port Colborne Hospital is always catered to Port Colborne and Waynfleet together. And then the other issue is the emergency department and how the Welland Hospital will roll out, which is actually sooner than what we are going to be discussing with Port Colborne, but our concern with the emergency department in Welland. So as this moves on, we'll be bringing more updates to City Council and our community, and you'll see more things rolling out after our next meeting. With that, Council, that's my report. If anybody has a question, I'll take it. Councillor Bruno.
I didn't have one until your last statement there about this committee. I would not want to see any disharmony in the issue of you drive down to Niagara Falls, you're on Bigger Road, you're on Monrose Road, you see the beginning of that hospital. And I don't know, I'm not so sure it's a role for this committee, but it is a role if part or all of this building will survive in the new concept that you folks are working on, or it may not. Can there be a discussion either through your office or through this committee? We have what was the old nurses' residence, addiction. We have a lot of the hospital that's not in use. We have the potential whether there's going to be an urgent care, whether it be on-site or off-site. But that building, either partially now or going forward, is going to need another use, and we need to be in there at the beginning. And I don't know where that begins with our desires of what we'd like to see. Certainly they're intertwined with what might happen with healthcare. But I'm just wondering if we've given that some thought, or we need to get into that outside of the realm of this committee, or is it part and parcel of it? So I know that's kind of a big wish list question.
No, but quite frankly, we did a short discussion on it last night. And as I say, the whole idea of last night was getting together. Most of the people knew each other, but some people didn't know everybody. So it was that. It was kind of laying out a path where we want to go. We did discuss that. So city staff has already been talking to the NHS. I'm meeting with them again this week for some updates. We do talk about that site. We are kind of we get that first right of refusal for the site. But many of the people around the table had some great ideas. We've talked in the past about, somebody like Hospice Niagara taking over part of the old hospital or the nurses' wing, because the rehab center is moving to Welland, so it'll be gone. So those questions are there. Seniors housing was discussed, and how there's a number of private seniors residents that are actually going to be closing and giving up their licenses across the province, and where do those people live? What is the role of the Niagara region's seniors housing in Northland Point and the other facilities they have across the region? Is there a role for the region, the NHS, and the city of Port Colborne to partner on something? Is there a role of clinics to move in there to run X-ray, mammographies, or mammograms, those different types of healthcare that can be brought in? Really what we're looking at is, and as everybody has to know, healthcare has changed. It's changed from 2010 when we went through something very similar, from the 90s when we went through this. It changes so quickly. But primary healthcare, and the people that are on this committee are those that are in the know, that have been at those tables, that are continuing at those tables. These are some really smart people. But we've made the committee diverse, so we have industry and business involved, we have retiree involved, we have our spiritual community involved. But the majority of the people on this are healthcare people, whether it's seniors, whether it's bridges, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a retired nurse and former NHS executive that's been to the top tables at the NHS and how things have developed over the years. But healthcare has changed so much. So really our real key focus is, as we move forward, what is the best healthcare for the citizens of our community and Wainfleet? But also, what is the best for businesses that want to move here, where we don't want to see Welland closed down or the emergency department leave? Because quite frankly, that's a question that we talk about when economic development and the mayor's office and Steve's department and every other department, when we meet a new company that wants to look at coming to Port Colborne, we do discuss healthcare with them. And we tell them what is here, what's not here, what's available just down the road. Because you got to remember, and I've said this on the radio, I said it on a number of interviews that I've had with the newspapers. We are very lucky in Niagara with the healthcare system that we have, that we can drive 30 minutes and be at a pretty good hospital. There's areas in Ontario you're driving 2 hours to get to a small hospital. So we do have to count our blessings that way. However, we still have to make sure primary care, keeping those people that are normally a UCC patient out of the emergency departments, so that the long lines and the long wait times aren't compounded with closing both Fort Erie and Port Colborne's UCC. So those are lots of things to talk about. As I said, we went around the table for over 2 hours last night. We will be developing that. We will be coming back to you guys, but we definitely will be going out to the community with some surveys, some questionnaires and the like, to figure out, what type of primary care, what do you see as a new type of UCC in Port Colborne, how that may work, and also about Welland and the emergency department and surgical uses in Welland. We know they are changing, and they're bringing in, they're going to do lots of eye care there, and I think they're going to be doing hips and knees there. I mean, those things are evolving all the time. So, but those are the things that we want to bring forward. But I'll tell you, both both Dr. Remington and Tara Lee McLean, the wealth of information in healthcare that those two have because of what they do on a daily basis in our community, but with Jeff working with Fort Erie and the health teams that we have that cross each other's border with the partnerships that we've made there, and Tara Lee with Bridges, just on the everyday stuff that they see and what they see has worked, what hasn't worked, what more can we do, and changes that we need to make within our municipality as far as how we can make healthcare. And really, preventative medicine was a big thing that Tara Lee talked about, is not having those people go to UCC or emergencies, keeping them out of there because of preventative maintenance. So there's lots of things that they do, and as I say, we'll be bringing those forward. So thank you. Any other further questions? Great. Thanks, Council. Regional Councilor Fred Davies isn't here this evening. If there's any regional items, I'll be glad to answer those, or email myself or Fred and we'll take those back. Today was Public Works Day. There was the water wastewater review that they went through, which was voted well for Port Colborne. They within that report was our cross canal water wastewater tunnel that we've been talking about for a number of years is in the books there with that. So next budget we'll be hoping that we'll be hoping Fred and I will be taking that and making sure it's a project that moves forward. But it really overviewed the whole region of Niagara and really going out to 2030 and then also to 2051 with the plans. These aren't small dollars, folks. These are $1.6 billion of water, wastewater, and stormwater between now and 2051. That's the kind of money that we're looking at. So, but if you have anything more there, please send us an email or give us a call. Staff remarks. Madam Clerk, anything? Mr. Szapowski.
Yes, through your worship. Just two quick updates tonight. We wanted to remind the public that concrete work is taking place along the promenade on West Street between Charlotte Street and Victoria Street over the next couple of weeks. So sections of the promenade will be temporarily closed during this time to ensure the safety of the public. Secondly, at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, we're currently replacing the roof-mounted cooling tower, which is an integral piece of creating ice within the arena. And we'll also be starting the central gutter system replacement. So we are asking that the users of the facility bear with us for the time, and it will be taking approximately 6 weeks. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bowles?
Thank you. Through your worship, just an update to council. I think council may have received a couple phone calls in the last week. We sent out a letter to a number of residents and vacant land owners within the city. Council may know we have council does know we have a vacant property bylaw that says if you have a vacant property that sits on wastewater serviced land, we actually have a charge, and we charge the owner or that property the fixed charge for the wastewater fees. We do it, and it's set up in the bylaw for really three reasons. One is having that service land does increase the value of the property. Two, there is a cost to building the infrastructure and maintaining the infrastructure. And three, it really comes down to encouraging individuals to develop that vacant land. And that's what's done at a number of other municipalities across Niagara and Ontario with this type of fee. So it's not an unusual or a Port Colborne only fee, but just certainly just to bring it up here at council, if you do get a phone call with respect to the fee, put them in touch with myself or customer service, and we can have a conversation. One of the nice things with how we did do the letter and sent it out is we did have a couple people call in, and we did have a further review of some of their properties, so we were able to make some adjustments for them. And by sending out the letter before the charge was done, that was the hope. The hope was to have dialogue if need be. So anyways, that was just a quick update, and if council or anybody that's watching has any questions, please touch base with customer service, and we're happy to walk through how the fee works.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Mr. Long, anything to add? Nothing? CAO?
Thank you. Just one item through your worship to council and more so to the general public at large. I was not at the last council meeting, but I know that a motion was moved by Councillor Aquilina and approved by council for a staff report back on the access to Shirkston Shores Resort for Hamlet, owners of properties in the hamlet or residents of the hamlet under the easement that was negotiated by the city and Shirkston Shores in 2018. I think there was some I watched the video of the council meeting. There was some discussion around when that would come to council, but in the actual motion itself that was approved, it's suspected that it would be back today on May 9th. Unfortunately, when I got back to work, it was already past the deadline to send a report to the May 9th council meeting, let alone the work that would be required to go into the report. Councillor Aquilina and I have since spoken and talked about getting it to a subsequent council meeting. Unfortunately, I am away 2 weeks from today on May 23rd. The next meeting, and the meeting that we agreed on, was June 13th. I think, not to put words in any council member's mouth, but I think we agreed it was more important to get it done right rather than to get it done quickly and make sure that the best report that could be before council is before council. So you can expect to see that on June 13th.
Thank you, CAO. Anyone online have any updates for council? Okay, nobody come out. Councillors' remarks. I'm going to start with Councillor Bodnar this week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one. Through you to, I'll start with the CAO. The speed limit seems to have been changed briefly on Highway 3 in the gas line area. Overnight, we think, from 60 to 80K. Got some squawking on Facebook and a few people concerned. I wonder if the CAO could give us an update on that.
CAO?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, of course, is always the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is that Highway 3 in that section is not the jurisdiction of the city. It's in fact the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, MTO, as a provincial highway. The longer answer is that a little bit of a funny story, a little bit of a success story. It was reported very early on Monday to our customer service, which we often ask the public and council to go through that process, assigned to one of our supervisors and addressed very early in the day. And those signs were changed, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday. So if you've got calls today, let me know, because I think it was done yesterday. I'm sure it was done yesterday, actually. We think through the course of that investigation and reporting it to the proper authorities, which is the MTO, that it was either an accident where the region worked on a road that wasn't theirs, but more likely an act of vandalism where someone from the public at large, under the cover of night, pilfered 280 signs from somewhere and went of their own accord and put 280 signs up on Highway 3. Strange, but most likely true according to our conversations with the ministry, because the signs that were on the posts had previously been 60, have been identified by barcode to be Region of Niagara property. So the good news, it was all addressed and it was taken care of in the fullness of time very quickly. And that, I guess, is the story.
Councillor?
So don't believe everything on Facebook. Thank you.
You think? Kudos to staff on that one. Councillor Hoyle?
Through you, Mayor. May 2nd, I attended the groundbreaking event at Foyer Issue in Welland for Hospice Niagara on behalf of the city. $4.6 million invested by the province for the long-term care facility, adding 128 beds, 10 hospice beds tailored to francophone language needs. Attendees were Minister of Long-Term Care Paul Calandra, and Sylvia Jones, Health Minister. besides that, Mr. Bowles has lots of things coming, so I want to ask any of those questions. And also, thanks for staff for helping me out with some assistance on some stuff for the past week. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Counselor, for attending that. Counselor Elliott? I'm good. Thank you. Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Last Friday, I believe it was, I had the opportunity to pop down to the marina and have a walkabout, and I spoke to our manager there, Blair. And I must say, as having someone who's had a keen interest in the marina and the beautiful marina that we have, I actually didn't even know that we were the third largest freshwater marina on Lake Erie. And I have to say that I was kind of taken aback with the number of changes, all positive, and the look of the place and the changes that were there. So just in summary, I spent a half hour with him going over a few things that was brought up at council and the budget money that we allotted and the fortitude that we had to take with the help of Mr. Bowles, Brian Thiel, our CAO, some rather bold moves there the last 2 years, and you hope that they pan out. So just on that, and what I'm talking to there is the rates and obviously some changes and some added staff, but on the rate issue, they're actually targeting for the same or a slight increase in boaters. The rules and an agreement has put them probably, if the numbers that I saw was 4 times as much revenue so far this year as taken other years. So that's deposits, that's telling them what's happening and giving them a sense of security that the boaters are back. I was amazed that the boats, a lot of the boats were already in the water. And on Friday, I think last year, there was 8 boats in the water. There were 46 that day. So I know council approved that telehandler. They were both out working. The look of the place is dramatically changed. We've got a good spring, and so everything's green. But if you take a walk around there, the students had just started 2 days before, but just the look of the place was a whole different, fresh look. And I know for them, they all got a late start last year. Blair was new to the job. But I'd urge you all to go down there and have a walkabout. I'm sure things aren't perfect, and I'm sure there are some, people that maybe balked on things have changed, and now they got to sign an agreement and pay on time and all that. But if you were looking at that from a business point of view, from a sustainability point of view, from a place that's going somewhere, I think if we're always proud of the marina, you'd be more proud walking down there. So thank you to senior staff for putting those bold ideas forward and making those changes, and my colleagues to envelop them. So hopefully the marina will have the best year ever. But it was really first class, and I was impressed what 1 year did to that place and the changes that we've asked for. So kudos to everybody that was involved in that, and I'm sure it was departments helping down there. But yeah, it was a real awakening, and I know there's more to come there. I even noticed that the restaurateur is rebranded. It's not Don Cherry's anymore. It's got a new name. It was
Whiskey and Walleye.
Whiskey and Walleye. Had it on the tip of my tongue. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, hopefully it's going to be a great summer down there, and it's going to be more of a showcase than ever. So kudos to everybody. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggett.
I'm good, thanks.
Councillor Borgard. Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the CAO for providing an update and consulting me on that. I appreciate that. On Sunday, I attended the high tea at Roselawn, and I took my mother with me, and so I just wanted to put a kudos out to Roselawn and the staff and the Friends of Roselawn and the staff that waited on all of us, staff from the city of Port Colborne. So they did a fantastic job, and so I just wanted to highlight that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the manager of bylaw, I've had some communication in regards to some complaints that I've received from residents in regards to the Conservation Club. And we've had some dialogue, and I appreciate the information that you've given to me, but I just wanted to request that there be some investigation in terms of what's happening. And from what I understand, there's 2 days a month that there's shooting allowed with the club, but it has increased, so it's almost every weekend, and so the neighbors are not able to enjoy spending some time in their yard. So I just wanted to address it to bylaw.
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Aquilina. The Conservation Club is exempt from our bylaw as per the rules and regulations, which I sent you in section 12F. However, I'd be happy to discuss conversations with the Conservation Club to see if they're expanding their activities. The activities that they have now are 2 days a month for one activity and 1 day a month for another activity, which are all exempt from that area. But it doesn't exempt them from expanding their services, but I will happily have a conversation with them to see where they're moving forward.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Mr. Shapowski, can you, in the area that you guys are working on the promenade, specifically right by the pilot boat, can you contact your friends at the Seaway with regards to their public works people? The ladder that goes off the wall down and for the pilot boat has been damaged by other boats banging into it over the course of time, so it's not quite as safe as it used to be. So they actually contacted me thinking it was Seaway doing the work, and I said, no, I believe it's our city guys. But if you could make that call only because your guys are working there anyways, have that looked at. Great, thanks. Okay, items requiring separate discussion. 8.1. Mr. Bowles will be giving a presentation, but the recommendation is that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-73 be received and that the year-end levy surplus be transferred to the city's infrastructure reserve, and that the capital and related project and reserve balances of Appendix E, F, and G of Corporate Services Department Report 2023-73 be approved. Mr. Bowles, go ahead.
Thank you. Through yourself to council, we started the process of presenting on the year-end numbers, I think, last year, and want to keep that going so that way we have an opportunity to have a dialogue on how the past year went and looking a little bit forward. So some of you have seen some of these slides because they've been used in the budget process and that, but the one thing that I just highlight is sometimes we make forecasts about the future and we use the information that we have at the present time. For example, you'll see a slide about debt forecasts, but that may change. For example, at the last council, council approved the opportunity to go after a DMAF grant that would be for the water or for the storm sewer system. And should we get that grant, we would be adjusting some of the future forecasts. So if we go through the recommendation that our mayor has already read out, council is well aware of our vision, mission, and values, as well as our strategic pillars. That's what guided the year to which we had. I started off the presentation financially with this slide, just for council to take a look at. It was, I think, a very pressing slide in the last presentation because we were receiving funding for COVID. as well as where those funds were actually going. Net, after the 3 years of going through the COVID-19 pandemic, the city ended up with $181,000 being used from taxpayer dollars over the 3 years. We did receive about $2.6 million either in funding or in savings by not running certain other programs, i.e. there was savings the 1 year back in 2020 because of Canal Days. There was also savings when we had to shut down the arena, and those are highlighted above. I know this was I won't spend a lot more time on this slide. We talked a lot about it when we were presenting the 2021 numbers. The next slide really talks about the levy, and we take a look at the overall year. We did have, and you see at the bottom right-hand corner, $212,000. That is the budget to actual surplus. That's what staff is recommending be transferred to the infrastructure reserve. I've tried to highlight with the team a couple of the key revenue areas to which we did receive additional funds. You can see on the right there's a numerous number of grants that staff applied for, and we're in front of council looking for approval to do. As well as, if you kind of go down the list, interest rates did rise, and because the city hasn't had to issue any debt in recent years, we haven't had to actually have a conversation about what the impact that has on issuing debt. But with respect to our reserves, our investment income was $468,000 higher than we originally budgeted as we went through this. There's also a couple other points out. The Valley Community Improvement Program, that came through with $250,000, part of over $1 million that they're providing the city for numerous capital projects, as well as the museum received a donation of $150,000 that went to reserve for future museum capital work. You can see at the bottom some of the, well, I guess in Canal Days. Canal Days is kind of an interesting one when you look at why revenue went up, because its expenses also go up. And when we did the 2022 budget, and we talked about it when we were doing the 2023 budget, we really budgeted for a smaller Canal Days in 2022 because we didn't know where the pandemic was going to come. But what we ended up happening is the restrictions were opened up and we had the full Canal Days. And we presented that, I think, at a couple meetings ago. The next slide outlines some of the core areas where we had expenses. One of the core areas, and I know council has had this question before, was with respect to legal expenses. They were considerably over budget, but I'd also point out, and I have another slide coming up, where we did close that one of those legal deals with respect to a pending sale that happened many years ago with land, and that did reimburse most of those legal costs of that $150,000. A couple other things. There was a reassessment. Reassessments were $113,000 over budget, and when you're looking at that, and anybody watching might wonder what a reassessment is. Well, there were a couple commercial properties, one industrial property and one commercial property that did go through the reassessment process, and MPAC did have to reassess their assessment lower. And when that happens and you go back for multiple years, the city then has to reimburse that property owner. And that's why even when you look at the 2022 budget or 2023 budget in detail, we do budget for these. This was kind of an anomalistic year where we had to pay back a number of years on a commercial property specifically, and that commercial property was part of a provincial-wide reassessment program. So it wasn't just us in the city, it was us, multiple cities, talking with MPAC with respect to that large commercial property. And then you can see one of the things that I'd point out is there was actually savings at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, and we talked about this when we did the 2023 budget because we adjusted the 2023 budget utilities, but we thought when we started the process, or when we were going through COVID, we thought that because we were shutting down the Valley Health and Wellness Center that we were receiving numerous savings from the utility budget. But over time, with some tweaks that were done by staff, we were actually able to permanently save on the Valley Health and Wellness facilities with respect to utility costs, and you can see that reflected there. Staff development was also slightly under budget. And then my next slide, and I have to apologize on this slide, accountants are great with numbers. Sometimes we get really quick with some words, and those last four check marks that reference storm, water, wastewater, and under over, I apologize to council, but we just need to strike those because they have nothing to do with this slide. How they made it on there, I don't exactly know. It's the levy slide. It has nothing to do with water, wastewater. But what we did try to do is highlight some of the extra reserve transfers that happened during the course of the year. We did use the infrastructure reserve. We had the CAT front loader purchase. There was a business case for that. Road grader as well. From the rate reserves, there was a water inflow and infiltration project that was approved mid-year, and that was done in accordance with, or in cooperation with the region, and there's regional grant funding for that. There was, as I mentioned, they received a donation, the museum, and we transferred that to their reserve. And then also economic development were highlighted there because they actually, with some of the funds from the sale of land, that's how we purchased, council remember, that's how we purchased the water tower property during the course of the year. So that was just funding that, pulling that money back out of reserves to do it. I think just to point out, this council, and I know we've had this conversation before about generational equity, but future liabilities is really when people are maybe working today and they're earning maybe a benefit that they might have in retirement. Maybe we have a property that's being used today, but we're going to have to decommission it at a later date. It's very important that councils put the funds aside to be able to pay those liabilities in the future. Otherwise, somebody else is going to have to pay them even when the benefit's not being received, and this council has done that and built that into the budget. So that's the transfer for those liabilities, and we know we're working with council to try to find ways to reduce those going forward. And then contractual settlements, and I think as I pointed out, we did have that sale of land, a long process, but it was closed out, and the recommendation that happened during budget process was to transfer the funds to the tangible capital asset or infrastructure reserve. I know sometimes I go really quick, and those were just a couple highlights, but if there are any questions just on the levy components, happy to take them, and then I can talk about self-sustaining entities.
Questions at this time? Proceed.
Okay, thank you. On self-sustaining entities, on our next slide here, I'm going to acknowledge there's a lot of information on this because there's the 4 self-sustaining entities. Maybe just to dissect some of the language. When you see the actual, that's because we budget for 0, we budget for break even, we're comparing how we actually do. Well, the marina last year, we did see a change in the boater mix after COVID. We did have a couple fewer boaters, so we actually were $66,000 below our original budget. But when you actually look on the far right-hand side, we only had to fund $32,000 of that from reserve because we had originally left a buffer in the budget of $34,000. So the difference came out of reserve. We've reset the pricing, and we don't think we're going to have that situation this year. The beach operations, we had a conversation about budgets at the beach last week. And then at the building did see a surplus of around $11,000 last year. And if you look at the bottom on the left-hand side, you can see how much is in the reserves. And just as a reminder for anybody watching and for council, and I know we've talked about this before, but when the marina had to purchase the telehandler and had to do some additional work, we did have to borrow some money, so we borrowed it internally. And you can see at the end of 2022, the balance was $965,000. They plan to pay $100,000 and $100,000 every year, and then they'll pay the loan back over a period of time. So also on the beach operations, you can see, and we talked about this at the last meeting, we are budgeting in 2023 to have a slight loss we originally did, and that's to cover some of the costs with respect to the consultant. And then in the building department, you might be surprised when you think, oh, we're going to have to use some of the reserve for the building department. I've now been here for 3 years. Every year I've been here, we budgeted to use $90,000 from the building department reserve, and every year we added money to the building department reserve. This city continues to grow, and people continue to come to the building department to file applications to continue to grow. So I think there's a little bit of underestimating the activity that's going to happen financially, but definitely what we're seeing is a strong uptake in building permits. On the next slide, I do have just an update on the rate budget. On the rate budget, as council will know, it has the water, wastewater, and storm sewer budgets all combined. When you add all the budgets together, it's about $13 million in revenue. It came very close to hitting the revenue, just over on the revenue side. You will see, though, on the expense side, some of the salient comments. Wastewater charges, the lake was significantly down, so wastewater charges were down from the region considerably from what we had originally budgeted. It is the reason why we were able to hold the wastewater rates flat going into 2023. If we do see the lake water come up, we may have to adjust that in future budgets. Other things that you'll see is contract services, repair and maintenance were slightly under budget. Those negatives refer that they were slightly under budget. Ultimately, I'll show you here on the next slide what ends up happening there, and council's aware. If we do have a surplus, and we ended up having a surplus in wastewater, we end up adding that to the transfer to reserve for future capital projects. And that's how we fund the next year's capital budget. So those funds, although we're under budget maybe last year on some of that maintenance because of timing issues, will get redeployed through this council with reports that will come from Public Works to redeploy it into new capital projects. Storm sewer was slightly under budget, and that had to do with the change in the payment cycle where council might remember we were adjusting boundaries in that, and there was some refund processes that happened, and that's what was causing that as we go forward. I think what's important for council, and I highlight specifically, if you look at the 2023 forecast balance for reserves, that's what's unallocated in those reserves. So that's available to be deployed through future projects as Public Works continues to plan those out.
Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Back many years ago, we had a rate stabilization budget. And now that you have surpluses, which is admirable that we will plow that back into the ground and do more work faster or start work earlier, how do you gauge that when, without a rate stabilization budget, the canal rises, the numbers change, the reserve can't be used to start those projects? Should there be a rate stabilization reserve and then future capital reserve, so you know what part of that, if it gets that high, you can use and not use?
Pauls?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor and council, it's a good question. The complexity and the balance that I think needs to be balanced with this issue is there's considerable capital work that needs to be put forward. So ultimately, in the long run, even if you do a rate stabilization because the lake goes up or down, there's going to have to be an adjustment, and I hate to say it, but there'll likely be an adjustment to rates over a period of time to make that up. What we have seen in the last 2 years is it fluctuate on our budget by about $600,000. So if I was to suggest to council on the wastewater line, it would be that we maintain at least $600,000 or $700,000 in that reserve. That would give us at least a 1-year grace period should we need to for rate stabilization. But you can see right now, forecasted at 2.3, we would be above that balance figure. In time, though, and I know we've had many conversations, a lot more capital work to happen in wastewater.
Thank you.
The next slide, and maybe I'll present it and then ask for any questions. There's actually 2 slides, I think, here on capital, so maybe, council, if you can let me talk to both, because I think council may have some questions on capital projects. What we've tried to do here is summarize them by a kind of responsible department. You can see the majority of these are in Public Works, have the majority of the projects and how the reconciliation worked. There is an appendix in the report that actually lays out every single project in a verbal update. A couple things that, as a treasurer, I'd give as an observation, and maybe this slide doesn't speak to everything here, but when we gave the budget presentation back in December, which we basically had filled out and completed most of that in the November period before we went public and brought it to council, we had forecasted 19.6 million in capital projects would be carrying over to this year. So as a treasurer, I really give our Director of Public Works kudos, because he actually continued to close out projects as we were doing our forecasts in the October, November, December period, and he got that figure down to 18.1. Still a very large figure, but it was 1.8 million below what we were forecasting when we did the budget. So kudos to his team to get to that point. And just for those, because I know the report is lengthy and the appendices are lengthy, but in the public works, in the 7.9 million, a couple of the big projects, about 1.6 million relates to a number of years of fleet budgets that were approved over a period of time, but because of COVID, there was backlog. Almost all of that is going to be pushed through by mid-year this year. The Valley Health and Wellness chiller is in there, which is going in right now. West Street, Council may remember we received a grant for West Street streetscaping. That's a project that's being developed. It's a multi-year project. The Welland Street Trail is a multi-year project. It's going to take, I think we have till 2028 to finalize that, but I'm pretty sure Council's not waiting till 2028 to do that one. And the Valley Health and Wellness is in roof and piping repair is in that. So if you were to take just those 5 projects, that's over half of that $7.9 million. And all of those projects, including the roof, is underway right now. Sorry, not all of them. The Welland Street Trail, I think, still needs some planning, but 3.5 of that 4 million is already underway. So a lot is going on that stage. And just for council's reference, if you're looking at the rates side, that make up the 7.1 million, there's a $5 million going into water pipe replacements, which is funded almost 2/3 by the federal government, as well as Erie Street, which has about $1 million at the end of the year cash payments that hadn't yet been paid. So 2 projects make up almost the full component of that. I'll also point out, just as council may look at how do we get that number and get more projects completed, in the 2023 budget, council did approve for the first time 2 project managers. They weren't new to the budget, they weren't incremental, but basically when positions became vacant, we replaced them with project managers. It was the first time we actually had dedicated staff to complete projects in the city. And I can already see, and we have to kind of adjust the cash flow a little bit because projects are clearing out and starting to clear out. So I can see that. And then on my next slide, and then maybe if council has any questions, this slide just highlights the number of projects that remain at the end of the year. And I'll point out for reference, so there was 90 projects on the books at the end of the year, and we approved almost 60 projects during the 2023 capital budget. So in total, there's 150 projects on the go. We will report an update on those projects in June to council based on our trimester 1 timeline on where those are. And I think the only other component I'd make is that between the 90 and the 60 that were approved, that's 150. That is below, just numbers, observation, below the 2022 high of 189. So total number of projects has come down, and even with the new projects that came on, it's still below our, I guess, all-time high. So it's nice to see some of that movement happening. On that, I know it's capital. Normally there's a question or two on the capital slides.
Questions, anyone? Councilor Bruno.
Thank you. This was a question that I asked to pull a report on. So I see that in projects open prior to 222 was 68, but I guess I don't have a context at what was 2021 and prior to that. So to me, that focus on clearing out projects, the reorg, the project managers, I know Councilor Bagu was on this a lot, all over it, in fact. And so I don't know if you can explain to us what dropped from 221 to 68 as far as those old projects. I get 2022. Those projects always bridge over a year. So Brian, I don't know if you have a pre-number that now is lowered to 68, or I'm assuming lowered to 68.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, you know, I left it I apologize to the council. The council gave me the heads up and asked how many projects of that 68 was still there, and I just have to apologize to the councilor. I don't have that with me, and for all the effort that you made to give me that call to get that, I do not have it. So I don't know if our director of public works that's looking at the sheet right now can estimate. I might be able to do it before the end of the night because I have it at my desk. I can take a quick look and give council an update by the end of the night. I apologize for that.
That's fine if you can, or if you get back to us on it. You're going to report in June anyway, so we're not too far away. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
The other item is, I guess, reserves, just to talk quickly about. It's summarized here on this slide, but again, if council goes into the report, you can take a look and you can see the details by reserve and what makes them all up. You can see the majority of the reserves actually relate for capital. That amount under general government, if you were to go and look under that, the city does maintain a stabilization reserve in case there's an issue that we need to pull on. We also have a reserve that's set aside in case there is specific or strategic investments required going forward that's there. And that makes up two of the largest components of that general government. Capital, the majority of that is the rate reserve dollar figures, and that is directly in the appendix. I'll also just point out that if you add up, and this is kind of sometimes confusing because on the previous slide I said there's $18 million in capital works that have to occur, but we actually only have 9 million of the 18 sitting in the bank. The difference is grants that are yet to come in, because often you don't get the grant until you do the work, or we have the money sitting as a term called deferred revenue on the balance sheet. So the reason why when you see work in progress, the 9 million doesn't match the total value of all the capital projects, that's what that is. The other funds are either in an account called deferred revenue, or we're still waiting for the grant to come in, because you don't get the grant until the capital work actually occurs. And then the next slide just highlighting really the financial strength of the city going forward. We continue to pay down our debt considerably over a period of time. You can see the interest and principal charges are coming down over a period of time. And the ARL, which is an important term, it refers to our annual repayment limit. That really says how much debt we're allowed to borrow. The province says you can spend 25% of your own source revenue, which is basically your tax dollars or anything you have it for a user fee. So if you add those up, times it by 25%, that's how much money you can spend on principal and interest every year. The city has a very conservative self-imposed maximum of $15,000, which every time I refer to it, I often get a question from the mayor who asks me, I think it used to be 20. And then I said, well, I'm reading 15, so we can adjust it up to 20 if need be. But right now we're only at, I think, projected to be at 5.2. So we are in very good shape if we need to borrow, i.e. for that storm sewer grant.
15%, not 15,000.
15%, sorry, yes, thank you, sorry.
That's okay, thanks.
And then pictorially, we just showed where the debt, and you can see how the debt comes down over a period of time, and that figure at the top is really the debt payment, that it's coming down over a period of time. So our last debt payment on file right now would go out all the way till 2050, and that's for a storm sewer project that we have on the books. Most of our debt is actually in two projects. It's the Nickel Storm Sewer Project, and it's the Ops Center. That's almost all of our debt is those two projects. And on that note, I know it's a high level go through. The report has a lot of detail in it, and I welcome any councillor or anybody that has any questions to please send them my way, and I will get Councillor Bruno, who I again apologize for. He called and asked for that number, and I did not bring it to this meeting, to know how many projects pre-2022 are still in the books.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bowles, and I've read out the recommendation. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Aquilina move that. I think Councillor Bruno was the only one that wanted a question asked at the time, has already asked that question. Are there any further questions? Sure you can, go ahead.
Before Brian runs away. Appendix H, investments. Kind of caught me off guard when I read that number. When it says $26.4 million in investments. Can you just quickly, for all of us, explain that?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor and council, so the city ends up with cash flow because we collect taxes and then projects, and we saw the projects where we are with $18 million on the books, about $10 million in the bank to pay for those projects. As well, we have reserves for sustainability, for post-retirement benefits, for future liabilities. So the city takes those funds and we invest it while we have that timing difference in cash payments. I think to put it into perspective, it does sound like a lot, but also from a cash flow perspective to run the city's budget is approaching $50 million. So there is, we get tax payments, for example, 4 times a year, and while we get those, we invest them while we make the payments. So it really becomes a timing difference over a period of time. So I don't know if that helps the councillor. I guess the only other comment is we knew interest rates were rising. The city used to, when we go back in history, used to buy like 3 or 4 investments and that was it. With interest rates rising, we tried to mitigate the risk and buy slowly as rates rose, and you can see some of the rates are now earning 6%. So it's paid off pretty well for the city.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thanks. Yeah, so that's what I thought it was, just an in and out account and holdings for reserves until such time as projects are completed. We got to withdraw down on it to pay for the projects and things like that.
Yeah, through the mayor, the Director of Public Works has every plan to bring that project balance down, so that investment figure is going to fall.
I'd like to hear that. Get them done. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Next is item 8.2, user fee principles 2023-91. The Corporate Services Department report 2023-91 be received. That the user fee principles as set out in the report and associated appendix be approved. Mr. Bowles has a presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. Normally we just provide a report, but I thought that given that user fees, come up in the budget presentation as well as on multiple other occasions, it would be worthwhile to quickly go through a couple slides to just highlight some of the principles that we put forward as staff and look for council's direction if they felt comfortable with these principles. And then staff would go through the process of updating their user fees going into the 2024 budget process with some specific look at a couple of the user fees being cemetery and arena reserves, arena user fees, which we've been talking about recently. So just quickly, and I know staff's aware of this and it's right in the user fee bylaw, but there's really a couple of areas that really dictate where user fees come from. The first is the Municipal Act. Building Codes, Cemeteries Act, and Planning Act all lay out stipulations. And I think we highlighted here just in the Municipal Act, it says that we can charge a user fee to cover our costs. We're in a different position because sometimes people look at it, well, you charge a user fee, you're trying to make a profit. Well, we're actually trying to cover our costs. And that's when we talk about full cost recovery, we'll talk about there's a lot of costs that do exist that sometimes we don't always work into user fees. And we want to work on a process to make that more transparent so council can make a decision. Do they want to charge for those or don't they want to charge for those? So there's a lot of municipalities that have a lot of work on user fees. For a long time, I think Calgary's been a leader with respect to user fees. For us, talking about these principles really help explain the why do the user fees exist. There is the benefits principle, and I'll go through each of these. The cost recovery to receive your funds back. There's a management of asset principle. There's also the allocation of resource principle. So really quickly, just from the benefits principle, it's really who receives the benefit of a service should ultimately pay for a service. And I think a lot of people make that argument in a lot of things that we do. You often hear that if you're going to build a place or build a house or build a property, you should have to pay all the costs associated. Quite often people say growth should pay for growth. So benefit principle is somebody that's going to benefit from something would pay for it. The next principle that really exists when it comes to user fees is the cost recovery principle. It's if the city is going to incur a cost, and if you're going to apply principle one, where if you're going to benefit from it, you should pay for it, you look at all of the costs that could be incurred. And we just highlight a couple costs that often don't get built into user fees. And I can say right now, for example, environmental costs, the cost of carbon, don't get built into your user fees in the city of Port Colborne. And I think it's something that's really gaining discussion in other areas in the municipal environment. Also things like social costs. Sometimes we don't build into, or you can think of, and one of the easiest examples that I could come up with, social costs into user fees may be the cost you charge for sugary drinks. It may be a health issue where somebody says sugary drinks are something that we want to maybe make less available, or we want to raise money so we can donate to other causes that would support health issues with respect to a sugary drink. It might sound a little simple to use that one, but I think it's one that hits home. It's an area where somebody could charge a social cost because we're trying to have an impact. And then a couple other ones are just the impact of foregone revenue or foregone opportunities. Sometimes when the city does something and we're able to provide a service for one, it means somebody else can't have a service. So sometimes you can work in a fee into those charges, so that way you can make the other party equally or better off. Then one of the other items, I guess, to point out here, other than operating administrative, which I think most people got a handle on, is just capital. Oftentimes, we don't build capital into our user fees. Like for example, right now, when we charge at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, the charge that we do is based on a market rate of what everybody else is basically charging. Council approved the average. But when you think about that, that average doesn't pay for the whole cost of the facility, and it doesn't cost to maintain the facility. That's not to say that that's the wrong way to go. It's just we haven't actually calculated what the true cost is and what the true subsidy is we give on certain user fees. And it'd be staff's recommendation that we work on a process to try to do that for council. The next principle really refers to the management of public assets principle. This really refers to that assets have a value and we have a stewardship role to protect those assets. So charging a fee for them helps to acknowledge that and helps to maintain them going forward. And the last principle that's really used in user fee development is really that oftentimes there's limited resources within ourselves, within municipalities or within organizations, and establishing user fees can help spread access, making it maybe more affordable for one, or maybe reducing demand. We saw that, I guess, at the beach during COVID. We had significant demand for our beach, and there was discussions about how the user fee should go to make sure we covered the full cost, and we did have to make adjustments because the cost went up considerably to manage the beach during that period of time. So, not too exciting, but there are four, I guess, core principles I just wanted to bring to council's attention. They're in the report. And then there's, I guess, kind of the cost model. I don't know if council has any questions on those four principles.
Anything, guys? No, keep going, Brian.
The next really just comes down to the model. There's really three financial models that staff is proposing that we would use. So we would take the principles and we'd say, does a user fee kind of meet the four principles? Is it something that council needs to do? Then we'd go through a process and identify each user fee and put it into a model, 1, 2, or 3 for you. Model 1 would be, and I guess I have a slide for each of these, so I'll jump through these 3 slides. Model 1 is the full cost recovery model. It's also in one of the principles. For example, and I looked this up, so it's $50 per ton of CO2. So over time, and we may not have that for the first round of this adjustment with user fees, but something we could build in with our climate coordinator going forward is to continue to see if we want to bring in the cost of carbon in that. And then those dollars get repurposed for projects that help reduce the CO2 within the city. Administrative costs, we're talking internally right now, and we've talked about with this our self-sustaining entities, we use about 15%. And we would look at asset replacement. So we've now done facility condition assessment. of the Valley Health and Wellness Center. We have an idea of how much it's going to cost over the next 20 years. We could make and we could build that in. It may not be into the user fee, but we could build it into a column beside the user fee so council was aware what the true cost of ICE was. So that way council was aware what the true subsidy was going forward. So Model 1 is looking at all the costs and calculating the true cost. Model 2 really comes down to, and this is where things become a bit of a hybrid, we would really say that some costs you're going to subsidize, but you're going to subsidize it equally for everybody. And when you subsidize it equally for everybody, you're doing it because you're most likely looking to improve demand, or you're trying to reduce affordability barriers. And a lot of our fees, I would say that we do subsidize. Or we're trying to promote specific initiatives. So the subsidized model is really, you bring it down once, everybody pays the same fee. The last model is really, it's kind of like taking full cost, you acknowledge there might be some subsidy, but then you have differentiation. And the differentiation model might be, and a good example would be the beach. We have differentiated fees during the weekday when demand is lower than we do on the weekend when demand is higher. We have differentiated fees to be closer to the beach versus further from the beach because we're trying to impact behavior because we don't have enough spots at the front. And that's why we charge a little bit more for that added convenience. So really appreciate council's time. It's not too complicated of a process, but we'd be recommending this as our as kind of like the model to go through and review all of our user fees if council was on board.
Great, thanks, Brian. If I can have Councilors Bruno and Hoyle put this on the floor, and Councilor Bruno has asked for a question. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Bowles answered it in his presentation.
Thank you. Further questions on this one? Councilor Borgreich.
Through your worship to Director Bowles, just so when are we going to be like? Are you going to be applying these principles to every user fee going forward? And when you present it to us, we're going to see it, the principle and how it. I'm just kind of trying to picture how this will work in practice.
Through the mayor to the councilor and council, that is what our goal is. We're setting an ambitious goal to be able to do every fee by the time we get to the 2024 capital budget, but that is the goal. The goal is to say, here's the recommended fee, and if we are subsidizing or differentiated, here's what the full cost would be. So that way, you as a councilor have a very transparent understanding of what the fee is versus what kind of the market rate is on these things.
Councilor?
Through you, just wondering, are we going to be able to, like, is council going to be able to kind of look at it and be like, on this type of fee, we think that it should be a, I don't know, full cost recovery, or this one should be, like, are we able to go through each one and kind of break up fees based on what we think should be as, yeah, like I said, subsidized, full recovery, yeah, all that stuff.
Bowles? Through the mayor to the councilor, 100%. Our goal is, as staff, to try to prepare things as much as we can through the kind of what we see as a leading practice, what we see other municipalities doing or having in their conversation. And then we'd look to council not to just approve the fee, but to go through the fees and recommend changes, recommend things that you might be having or discussions that you're having with your constituents, because maybe you don't, or maybe you'll bring comments forward to say that this shouldn't just be a subsidized fee, but there should be differentiation for different components. One thing that we will be bringing forward is when we do this, recognizing that when you bring in differentiation, you can bring in more complexity. I think there's another report on the council tonight where we are talking about beach parking rates, and the more differentiation we have, I think the more complex it can sometimes be to implement. But 100%, it's we look to councils to recommend. We're just, I guess, asking for the. We bring this forward to council to say this is kind of how we plan to start the process, to bring it to you to finish the process.
Councilor? All set. Councilor Baggy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bowles. Thank you very much, Mr. Bowles. This is definition of transparency, not only for council, but also for the residents. And I think we all appreciate it. And there may be some things when we set a fee that I won't like. some fees I will like. I understand that, take the good with the bad and everything else. One question I do have, in the future, I'll give you an example. If the marina needs a $4 million dredging operation, who pays for that? Like, do we up the rate of the marina to cover $4 million over 20 years, or?
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor and council, it's a good question. I highlighted in the budget presentation as kind of one of the risks or big projects that are kind of on the table for the municipality to talk about. The total cost of that project, and I've made reference to councillors that have asked, we've had individuals come in saying it could be anywhere between $2 and $6 million, a very significant, so staff's not in a position to recommend a price or anything like that, but that is a conversation that council is going to have that conversation. Is that held by the boat owners, or is that held by the community, because the park itself has value to the whole community? So that's where establishing fees like this are going to lead to questions like that the councillor brought up, that this council is going to have to debate to see how you want to move forward with it.
Councillor?
To you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, Mr. Bowles. I do agree. That's why I guess council makes the big bucks. We got to make the big decisions, I guess, eh? So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burrow.
Thank you. Councilor Beauregard got me thinking about when we look at rates and fees, there's pages of them. And I don't know whether it's, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but, you know, to go through all those fees, I mean, maybe rather than by category, maybe it's at cost recovery and then subsidy, because I think if they're at cost recovery and you're happy with, unless you're not happy with that, you can pull that out and put it into the subsidization column. So I'm just thinking the ease of looking at all these fees when you bring them forward. I don't know if you have a game plan as to how to do that.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, I've thought about that too, and then when I looked at the sheet, I know that building and planning fees are all done through a consultant process because they are full cost recovery fees. Our goal is, we're saying June, maybe it'll be July, but we want to do the health and wellness and the cemetery kind of off. The marina and the beach are self-sustaining entities. So if you take out those 6 areas, you're going to hit almost 80% of our user fees in dollar figures, in which case, yes, there's still going to be a lot of fees to look at, but the other question we're asking staff is, if the dollar figure is not significant, maybe we want to go back to council and have a conversation to why we have a fee. Because the cost of maintaining certain user fees, when maybe more expensive than it is to, by charging it just to even have the fee. So we may come back and recommend that some of the fees maybe be eliminated.
Thank you. Great, thanks. Further questions? Councillor?
Through your worship to Director Bowles, could we compound principles, like stack them, I guess?
Right.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, 100%. It's very likely that a user fee is going to hit 3 or 4 of the principles to be able to move forward as to the why.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to just nicely put them in one category, they'd overlap.
Through the mayor to the councillor, that may not be the case. And I think as council's been working on its strategic plan, it sees the same thing with the strategic plan. Many times a project hits many strategic planning elements, and I think the same thing here with user fees. Each user fee will probably hit many of the same principles.
Okay. Further questions? All in favor? It's carried. Next is the Nickel Beach Parking Bylaw Amendments 2023-86, moved by Councillor Hoyle, seconded by Councillor Elliott, that Corporate Services Department Report 2023-86 be received. That council approve the amendments to the permitting system for parking of vehicles on designated highways and parking lots in the city of Colborne. Bylaw 7006/44/22, identified as Appendix A of Corporate Services Report 2023-86. That council approve the new parking fees identified in Appendix B of Corporate Services Report 2023-86. That the updated Schedule G of the user fees and charges bylaw be included in a future amendment to the fees and charges for various services bylaw 7047/84/22. Also of note, we have a written delegation. The material is included in the report from Melissa Bigford, who's a resident of Port Colborne. Questions? Councillor Hoyle.
Through the mayor to Director Bowles, unless you want to do those other questions first, because they're kind of the same as the ones I have. That was presented by Melissa.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor and council. I did receive that document, and I did take a read of it. I noticed that it references, and one of the big questions is, we went canvassing in Zone 3, and as a staff, if I could take a moment just to thank Councillor Hoyle, who came door to door with us and was in my group, and we went door to door in Zone 3. And I think one of the big questions in what was submitted was, why didn't we go door to door knocking in Zone 4? And if it wasn't clear in the presentation that we gave at the last council meeting or here in the report, is right now there's no plan to move forward and put up signage or to restrict the parking in Zone 4. The bylaw that's presented tonight references Zone 4, but it only references Zone 4 in case we need to enact parking to protect those residents going forward. It doesn't become active until we actually put up a sign. So we have no intention right now to putting up a sign to restrict parking until, and hopefully we don't have the situation, until we had an issue with parking, in which case we'd be back in front of council, talking to council about that, and we will go door to door knocking in that area. So said another way, Zone 4, which we've been talking about, is an area that has no change to their parking right now. There's no change whatsoever. I think one of the other comments that came up was, and it was a comment that we heard from council early on in the process, was what happens if I have somebody come over on the weekend? And we have acknowledged that we do have a visitor program that you can call in. We can give you a special visitor pass, as well as you have your participate pass, and you can, as long as you put it on your dashboard, or even maybe your neighbor you could borrow and put in your dashboard. It still is a little bit of activity, but those are the recommended mechanisms that we have right now. And again, we point out that in Zone 4 there is no restricted parking going forward. Having walked in Zone 3 and done and talked to a number of residents, and this was just personal anecdote. Generally, it was receptive, understanding. I actually had two residents comment that maybe we should have moved this and done these changes earlier. So so that was just a personal observation by talking to residents. I think many were appreciative of the fact that we were handing out the participate passes and making sure that they had a mechanism to park on the street should they want to.
Councillor?
I think the last thing, like I talked to you earlier today, is the biggest thing is that if something happens on a weekend, where can they go to get passes? And right now there's nothing in place. Is there any other city facility open that we could move if that happens?
Well,
yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, if it does happen, and we've heard this, and I know our conversation today, had a conversation with staff between that, so I apologize I didn't give an update on this yet. We will have it set up that you'll be able to pick up a pre-printed pass that we'll have somebody sign, but you'll be able to go to the beach gate and get one, because we will have staff at the beach gate.
Okay.
Thank you. That answers all my questions.
Actually, I had a great idea to my right here, Counselor. If you just give out your address, we can have you give you a supply of passes. Come right to your door, little knock, and you can hand them out for us.
Just to add to that, if you see the amount of emails and calls I get on this, probably not a bad idea.
Well, not a bad idea. No, correct. Mr. Bowles, I mean, it's great that staff went out and Councillor Hoyle for attending that. Yeah, getting out and talking to the public, and now you guys know what we go through during election time. But this was pretty centric on what you were dealing with. But and I've heard some feedback from residents, and they really appreciated it and looked at it as good service from the municipality. So again, for you and your team out there, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Elliott.
A couple questions, but just one for clarity right now. So there tends to be a few parties that happen at people's houses, birthdays, backyard parties and things like that. So if I'm having a birthday party and I've got 15, 20 people coming over, there's 10 cars in the street, I can get 10 passes for all of them? And you would get those, like if it's on a Sunday, they can go to the beach gate to get passes for everybody.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, yes, you'll be able to do that.
Okay, just because parties on the weekend in the summertime are going to happen, so I just want people to know that you can get as many as you need for the guests that are coming to your house.
Yes.
That they will be available at the beach gate. Okay. One other, well, a couple of questions through you, Mayor, to Brian. Parking time is 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Does that mean we're going to have bylaw on duty at 7 o'clock in the morning to go around to the streets to check cars?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor and council, we do have limited bylaw, and we have bylaws that are in force across the city, right? So if council wishes to have like a bylaw officer there for the full 7 to 9, we can go back and replan that, but we don't have the expectation that we're going to have one there for every minute of those hours in between. There is additional bylaw support that's been added to the complement, but they will be roaming or doing the whole city and rotating through.
Okay. I just wondered.
Councillor, just further to that.
Yeah.
Last term, we know with regards to the beach ends, between Brian's staff and Chief Lawson's staff, with bylaw, they were able to pivot very quickly and move some hours and some people around. And it worked out well. So I think if we allow them to move forward as we hope it doesn't happen, but if complaints come in from the neighborhood that, these are the really bad times, these two gentlemen can pivot their staff and react fairly quickly with regards to stopping it quickly.
And through you, Mayor, the reason that I asked the question is I'm just wondering how busy is the beach through the week at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Okay.
Right? So like you're starting the pay to park at 7 o'clock in the morning, but really how many people are going to be there? Like Monday to Thursday, I can't see a lot of people getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to the beach for 7. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just putting it out there, like in reality, that's the slow time. So, if you started paid parking at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock when it actually gets warm enough and people start to trend to go to the beach at that time. I'm just, when I saw the 7 o'clock, I thought that's rather early to be starting. So that's just food for thought. I did have one question with regards to in the accessible parking. If a resident displays an Ontario-issued accessible parking permit, they will be able to park in Zone 1 accessible parking spots, provided there are spots available. Is that accessible parking spots only, or just any spot in that parking lot? Mr. Bowles.
Yeah, so through the mayor to the councillor, the plan is, and we will be selling Zone 1 through the same program, pre-booking program that we've had before. We were playing with it to put it online to make sure everything worked. And without advertising, spots already got sold, even though we were just testing to see if it was going live. So we know there is interest at that rate. at that time. But we will be pre-selling those spots all in Zone 1. There'll be the pre-sold program. If you do show up and you want to park there and there's parking available, the students will be able to accommodate you with their iPad that they have there to bring you in. But we really highlighted on the accessibility standpoint that there is a number of spots, but it is possible that all the spots are taken. And if there is no other spot in Zone 1, the only accessible spot will be in Zone 2 because the spot would be taken. There's still a first come, first serve. There's no guarantee that somebody that requires an accessible spot will have a spot at the beach. There is still just limited spots.
Okay, but if they need an accessible spot and they're gone, but there's non-accessible available,
they can use that.
They can use, just wanted to make that clear.
100%.
That's it, I'm good.
Further questions? Councillor Hoyle?
Just to add what Councillor Elliott said, about the passes that you pick up at the beach, but those would be returned, wouldn't they, before they leave?
Through the mayor to the councillor, our anticipation to make it simpler is they will be sheets that we'll have printed out and identified, and we'll sign off with a date so they can just do whatever they want with them after the date expires.
It was just a question I know I'm going to be asked, and I'm just thinking about it. The other thing, will you be coming back with like a report after a month, maybe 2 months, to see where we're at with this?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, in 2021, when we made a number of beach changes to have to pre-order to pre-go on the beach, we set up a practice to come back monthly to council. In 2022, we didn't do that because we had a good rhythm and pattern going, but we recommend that we'll do the exact same thing this year. We'll be back on a monthly basis with council with things that we're learning. This will be a period of learning on this. Council, anybody that's been out there can see that Zone 1 is paved. The pavers are already out with we'll be planting it next week. The washrooms are down. Some of the signage, and the Director of Public Works is in my office almost every day saying that, we need to get the bylaw approved, and then we have to do locates, and locates are still going to take 2 weeks. So there will be a period of time where we're approving this bylaw. The beach will open, and not all the signage will be up, and we probably won't see all the signage up until the middle of June, just as a function of having to go through the process to get locates, poles, and other things up. So it was a very tight timeline, and I give a lot of credit to Matt Pilon and Public Works to how far they've come. You'll see in Zone 2, you'll see the parking lot is well on its way. You'll be able to park in that, which is great for opening day. I hear the weather's about 63 degrees. Maybe the wind will be making it warmer, and it'll be a fantastic place to be on opening day on the 19th. But ultimately, you'll also see that the culvert area, when it's kind of the short track to get to the beach, we're still probably a couple weeks out to be able to get the short path, the second entrance into Lake Road, and that's coming. It's just we're not there yet. So it will be a learning process, and the next 4 weeks, a lot of work will get done, and we'll be communicating to council regularly.
Great. All set. Councillor Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Bowles. In talking about the washrooms, are they standard washrooms, or is there one that might be a handicap?
Mr. Bowles?
Yep, through the mayor to the councillor. The prior council was very worried about that too, so I appreciate the question. There's a special ramp, there's a ramp that's going to be AODA compliant that's going to help, and there's actually 2 washrooms, so it takes you up and you'll have your choice. It's at the ends of each of the units. They're very large. You don't have to open the door. They're actually electronic. You just wave in front of it and they'll open for you. So they have all the amenities that are required to accommodate anybody that may have the need.
Councillor?
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Borgard.
Through you to Director Bowles, Councillor Elliott did mention 7 a.m. as a start time, and it looked like you were about to comment on it, but you didn't get a chance to, so I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I won't be as quick with the button next time. No, so staff spent a lot of time on that, and what we really needed, and we learned this during the Canal Day parking when that was brought out, simplicity is very important, and we had to come up with one time. So we knew that if we had a time like that said, let's say it was 8 or 9 o'clock coming to the beach for the parking lots, but then the streets were like 10 o'clock, or the parking lots were 7 and the streets were 9 o'clock, it was going to create confusion with respect to where you can park when. And then we started looking at, if we created that it's free until like 8 o'clock, then the concern was going to be people were going to miss the 8 o'clock, bylaw was going to give a ticket, were they going to come back, were they going to understand that they had to come back? So we basically said that 7 a.m., and we did it as a simple model where it was across the board. Ultimately, if you're a resident in the neighborhood with the Participate Pass, there's no impact to you because you just put it in your dashboard or you have your visitor pass, and it's free all the time. And if you're a resident of Port Colborne and you show up at the beach and you put your Participate Pass on your dashboard and you park in the parking lot in Zone 2, it's free. So the time doesn't really impact you if you're from Port Colborne. It's really just a time to say we'll start charging visitors to the beach the fee. And we thought it was simple to have one time everywhere.
Okay, Councillor?
Just want to say that I think I'm comfortable with the timing and what staff are proposing in this report. We're not really going to know exactly how it's going to roll out until it happens. So with what we have so far, I think it's worth moving forward, and I look forward to seeing the report after a month and making whatever adjustments we need to make it better for the residents in our community. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Seeing none, duly moved and seconded by Councillors Hoyle and Elliott. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. 8.4, Niagara Central Dorothy Rungling Airport Commission, the Corporate Services Department Report 2023-90 be received, and that council delegate authority to the CAO and the Director of Corporate Services Treasurer to enter into an agreement to purchase a hangar identified by the Commission and sell the hangar to the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungling Airport Commission, provided written confirmation from Grant Thornton of their verbal tax advice as outlined in the report and is received. I have Councillors Hoyle and Bodner moving this. Councillor Hoyle.
It's probably a quick no-brainer question, but we have 4 municipalities that take care of the airport, right? So isn't it business-wise or cost-effective to divide that fee up between the 4 municipalities versus Port Colborne just footing the bill? I get it, they're going to get it back under an agreement that, well, just word of mouth or however it is. So I don't know what agreement's been out there. So just had a question about it. Thanks.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor, it's a fair question. Ultimately, what we're doing here is as you said, we're a part owner in the airport. The airport has asked for the city to help facilitate a transaction for the purchase of a hangar. Ultimately, it's us buying a hangar and the very same day getting paid back for the hangar. So there's no cost to the taxpayer. The entity, which we're a part owner, has agreed to reimburse us all costs, including any legal costs or transaction costs. So it all happens same day, and it's a mechanism to help an entity that we're a part owner acquire a property for their purposes at a cheaper rate.
Councillor?
Thank you for your clarity.
Okay, Councillor Bruno.
I wanted to add, if I could, Councillor Bodner and I sit on that, and it's a great question. So with the 4 municipalities that owned it, it's kind of a difficult thing to manage. So like, to keep to the simplicity point of view, 2 years ago, there was an Ontario grant. Pelham used its grant that it foregoed applying for its own city, applied for the grant, so they kind of used their card. Last year, the City of Welland Economic Development Corporation loaned us, this is all public, $600,000 to build these hangars that we're doing. This year, we're doing this to try and see our thing, and hopefully Wayne Fleet will take another jot at something else to do to help the airport.
Okay. Certainly.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Brian. It also comes with a tax receipt, right?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor and council, yes, that ultimately, the individual, as we pointed out, is looking to sell for $100,000, and there's a fair market value assessment saying it's worth more than that, so they would get a tax receipt ultimately for the difference, and that's where bringing us involved kind of helps with the transaction.
Okay. Further questions? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, so we are on to motions. There are none. Are there any notices of motion? None, thank you. Minutes of boards and commissions. I'll do these. Actually, there are none. Sorry. Bylaws. I'm going to do the bylaws in block and remind you that the one bylaw was amended. So bylaw 20.1 through to bylaw 20.5. If I could have councillors Aquilina and Beauregard move those. Are there any questions on any bylaw? All in favor? It's carried. We do have one confidential item this evening, council. If I could have councillors Bruno and Bodner move that council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. In this case, matter. 21.1, Human Resources Verbal Report pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. So we thank those that came into the chambers this evening for the council meeting and those that joined us online. We will not be coming back here after we go back into open session after our closed session. So we thank you for attending, and we'll see you at the next meeting. This meeting is, or this portion of the meeting